Good morning. I chose to do my discussion board on Myles from Monster to Martyr, representing Mary Dyer, Early American Literature, 2001. Women in 17th century America lived in a very different world than we do today. Anne Hutchinson was the most known of the women that would go against the grain of the male-dominated society of the time. Anne Hutchinson had an effect on the religious and social issues, but she was not the only woman that would speak out against these. Mary Dyer is often overlooked. Mary was educated, she came from England. She emigrated with her husband and child in 1635 to Massachusetts. She was described by John Winthrop as a, quote, very proper and fair woman, although of a proud spirit and much addicted to revelations. I guess proud spirit probably meant that she was very independent and that she was a woman who, didn't take any guff from anybody and addicted to revelations. It was because she ended up changing and becoming a Quaker, would be my assumption. In 1637, she was first recognized in public records as the mother of a monstrous birth. Winthrop described this birth as brought forth her birth of a woman child, meaning a girl, a fish, a beast, a fly, not a fly, a fish, a beast, and a fowl, all woven together in one, and without a head. It is also noted that after Anne Hutchinson was thrown out of the church, Mary Dyer followed her. Hutchinson had been one of the midwives that Dyer had during this birth. Both women were accused of giving birth to monsters. Unfortunately, this often is misunderstanding of congenital birth defects. I'm not sure what his description, a fish, a beast, and a fowl all woven together, would even remotely mean, but that is his description of the child she gave birth to. In the male-dominated society during the 17th century, women were blamed for such things and many other issues as well. If anything went wrong, the women were to blame. Dyer left Massachusetts for a while, and she moved back to England. During this time, she would become a Quaker. And again, she would eventually move back to America. Now, Quakers' roles were different during this time. Women were more prominent in the Quaker faith. Gender roles were not focused on as they were as much as in the Puritan and Anglican churches of the time. And men and women during this time felt that they transcended the gender roles that they were given and could spiritually speak with public authority and voices. This shows advancement of the Quakers to include all the children of God, men and women, while Puritans preferred the male domination of church and society at large. Many times during the 17th century, voices of strong women scared those in power and upset the balance. This was why women were treated so differently during the time. Eventually, Mary would be tried as a Quaker in Massachusetts, and she left to Rhode Island. For a while, she stayed in Rhode Island and was fine, but eventually she would go back to Massachusetts, again with two other Quakers, and was tried and sentenced to death. The two men she went with were hanged, although she wasn't, and she was sent back to prison and banished again. During this time of banishment, she wrote 2 letters to the Massachusetts General Court. And as a Quaker, or a friend as they like to be called, they are outspoken and they are uncompromising in their beliefs, which most likely did not sit well with the men in command. They did not want to hear the truth to be told to them, especially from a woman. She would re-enter Massachusetts a third time in 1660. She was jailed, tried, and executed as a Quaker. She was hanged because she was a friend or a Quaker. I think that she was most likely hanged because she went against their grain and pretty much told them things that they probably didn't want to hear. The author also alludes later in her article to the Mary being a lesbian, but I tend to disagree with her assumption on this point. Mary was educated, she was smart, and a strong woman. These are not only hallmarks of lesbians, but straight women as well. God not only made male and female in his image, so I feel that the author does state that she is a lesbian, and so she takes forth some of that strong strength of Mary and projects her own views into that. But likely Jesus had, well, he did. Jesus had many female followers as well. So, Mary's problems probably stem, in my view, from her friendship with Anne Hutchinson and her own awakening to God's word. Being a strong woman, converting to Quakerism, where women were given more of a voice, and having a greater understanding are two of the things that we look to nowadays for leaders. Even back then would have been fine if you were a male, but not a female. 17th century Puritan males in control wanted to remain in control. They didn't want any women telling them what to do or when to do. Mary was like a fly. In fact, there was a fly that was buzzing around me, but Mary was like a fly that kept buzzing around them until they finally swatted her and she was hung for her beliefs. That concludes this. Thank you.